65% of every motorcycle battery sold on Earth is not going into a new bike. It is a replacement for a battery that already died. And the average life cycle driving all of that replacement demand is not 5 years. And it is not 4. It is 24 months, 2 riding seasons. The battery that came in your motorcycle was not designed to last. It was designed to be replaced. And once you understand the single engineering decision that made that possible, you will never look at the words maintenance free the same way again. The difference between a motorcycle battery that lasts 3 years and one that lasts 10 comes down to one part: a cap. A small removable screw-on cap sitting on top of each cell in the battery casing. For decades, every motorcycle battery on the market had them. 6 caps on a 12-volt battery, 1 per cell, each one giving the rider access to the liquid electrolyte inside. That electrolyte is a mixture of distilled water and sulfuric acid, and it is the chemical medium that makes the entire battery work. Over time, through normal charging and discharging, some of that water evaporates. The level drops. If it drops far enough, the lead plates inside the battery become exposed to air instead of acid, and exposed plates begin to sulfate, which means they develop a hard crystalline coating that permanently reduces the battery's ability to hold a charge. But here is the thing about those old batteries with the removable caps. If the water level dropped, you opened the cap, poured in a few ounces of distilled water, and the problem was solved. The plates stayed submerged, the electrolyte stayed balanced, and the battery kept working. Experienced riders who performed this simple check once or twice a year routinely got 7, 8, even 10 years out of a single motorcycle battery. One owner with professional battery lab experience documented getting 9 years from a conventional flooded lead-acid battery on his motorcycle, with the unit only failing in the 10th year. He did it twice with the same brand, showing it was not a fluke, but a consistent result. Then the industry switched to sealed AGM batteries. AGM stands for absorbent glass mat, and instead of liquid electrolyte sloshing freely between the plates, the acid is absorbed into fiberglass mat separators sandwiched between them. The case is welded shut. There are no caps. There is no way to check the electrolyte level, no way to add distilled water, and no way to perform the one maintenance action that kept those older batteries alive for a decade. The manufacturers called this an upgrade. They called it maintenance free. But what it actually meant was maintenance impossible. And those are not the same thing. Every lead acid battery on the planet, whether flooded or sealed, suffers from sulfation. During discharge, lead sulfate forms on the plates as part of the normal chemical reaction. During recharge, that sulfate is supposed to convert back into lead and sulfuric acid, but in practice, not all of it converts. Some of it hardens into crystals that coat the plate surfaces like gray chalk, permanently reducing capacity. The longer a battery sits in a partially discharged state, the harder those crystals become, and the less reversible the damage gets. On a conventional battery with removable caps, there was a well-established fix for this. You ran an equalization charge, which means raising the voltage above the normal charging level for a short period. This caused controlled gassing inside the cells, which mixed the electrolyte, broke down soft sulfation, and restored balance. Afterward, you simply topped off whatever water was lost through the caps. On a sealed AGM battery, you can technically attempt a conditioning charge. But when you raise the voltage, the gas produced has nowhere to go except through the pressure relief valve, a one-way vent designed for emergency overpressure. The hydrogen and oxygen escape into the air, and the water they came from is gone permanently. There is no cap to open. There is no port to pour distilled water back in. The electrolyte the factory put in is the only electrolyte that battery will ever have. Industry engineers at U.S. Battery Manufacturing have documented that gradual loss of water from the electrolyte is a failure mode specific to AGM batteries, precisely because it cannot be replaced the way it can in flooded units. So the sealed battery has the same disease as the old battery: sulfation. But the primary treatment, equalization, now permanently damages the patient. The cap that made the treatment possible was removed, and the battery dies years earlier as a direct result. Now you might assume this was an innocent engineering trade-off. Sealed batteries do have legitimate advantages. They cannot spill acid when a motorcycle leans or tips over. They handle vibration better because the electrolyte is locked in the glass mat instead of sloshing around. And they are easier to ship because wet cell batteries filled with free liquid acid are classified as Class 8 corrosive hazardous materials under the Federal Department of Transportation regulations, while sealed non-spillable batteries qualify for exceptions that cut shipping costs significantly. Those are real benefits, but they are benefits that primarily serve the manufacturer and the parts distribution channel, not the writer. The business math behind the switch tells a very clear story. The global motorcycle battery market is worth approximately $9 billion a year. The United States alone accounts for nearly $2.8 billion of that. And replacement batteries, not batteries going into new motorcycles, account for 65% of all units sold. The aftermarket replacement segment is projected to grow from $900 million in 2024 to $1.44 billion by 2035. That growth is fueled almost entirely by the replacement cycle. A battery that lasts 3 years instead of 8 generates roughly 2.5 times more revenue over the life of a motorcycle. The parts distribution channel, the dealers, the warehouse distributors, the accessory companies, all of it depends on you buying a new battery every few years. And a battery you cannot maintain is a battery you have to replace on schedule. If you are finding this useful, consider subscribing. I cover topics like this every week, pulling apart the engineering decisions that cost consumers money they never planned to spend. Now, let us talk about what happens when a frustrated rider decides to upgrade to lithium. Lithium iron phosphate batteries entered the motorcycle market in the early 2010s, led by brands like Shirai and Anti-Gravity. The marketing pitch was compelling. Half the weight, twice the lifespan. Almost no self-discharge during storage. On paper, it sounds like everything the sealed AGM should have been. But lithium motorcycle batteries introduced a whole new set of failure modes that riders in cold climates discovered the hard way. One KTM owner installed a Shirai in his 990 SMT and found himself stranded at work in minus 7 degrees Celsius weather. The battery would not crank, no matter what warm-up procedure he tried. He ended up taking a bus home in full riding gear, hitching a trailer, rescuing his motorcycle in the dark, and swapping the lithium for a lead acid unit that started the bike immediately. Another rider on an Indian motorcycle forum put it bluntly: the battery management system cuts off if you try to trickle charge the battery below minus 10 degrees Celsius. And if you live in the north, you should just stick with AGM. The battery management system, BMS, is supposed to protect the lithium cells from overcharge and deep discharge. But when the BMS trips, it electronically disconnects the main terminals. The battery reads 0 volts. Smart chargers see 0 volts and refuse to recognize it. The battery appears completely dead, even though the cells inside may still be recoverable. Shorey's own troubleshooting documentation walks owners through a multi-step recovery process involving their proprietary charger, a jump from another battery, or an old dumb charger that does not know enough to refuse. There is a compatibility issue that almost nobody talks about at point of sale. Motorcycle charging systems were designed for lead-acid batteries. They operate in a voltage range optimized for lead-acid chemistry. Lithium cells have different voltage requirements, different charge acceptance curves, and different sensitivities to overvoltage spikes. One Ducati owner documented his anti-gravity battery reading 0 volts mid-track day and suspected that the BMS was blocking the 14.1 volt output from his stock regulator rectifier. Compatibility is the word to remember. So the lithium upgrade solves one problem, the short AGM lifespan, but introduces new ones. Cold weather lockout, BMS failure, charging system incompatibility, and the need for a dedicated lithium-specific charger that costs an additional $50 to $100. The upgrade that was supposed to free riders from the replacement cycle can leave them stranded instead. There is another factor accelerating battery death that riders almost never check: the motorcycle's own charging system. The regulator rectifier converts alternating current from the stator into direct current for the battery, and it is supposed to hold that output between 13.5 and 14.7 volts. But regulator rectifier failures are one of the most common electrical problems across Honda, Yamaha, Kawasaki, and Ducati platforms. When the regulator fails low, it chronically undercharges the battery, accelerating sulfation. When it fails high, it overcharges the battery, boiling off electrolyte that cannot be replaced in a sealed unit. Either way, the battery dies early, the rider replaces it, and the cycle starts over because nobody diagnosed the charging system. The new battery fails again within a year or two, and the rider assumes batteries are just disposable. Underneath all of this is a seasonal storage problem that ties every battery type together. The Motorcycle Industry Council has reported that over 50% of preventable spring breakdowns are caused by winter neglect. Sealed AGM batteries self-discharge during storage, and even a few months without a charge can push them below the sulfation damage threshold. A $30 battery tender connected during storage prevents this entirely, but that information is almost never disclosed at point of sale. The dealer sells you a motorcycle with a sealed battery, never mentions that the battery requires a tender during winter storage, and then sells you a replacement battery 2 springs later when the original one is dead. The battery tender market has grown 18% year over year, and Deltran, the company behind battery tender, is now tracked by major market research firms alongside the battery manufacturers themselves, an accessory company being listed next to the companies whose products it exists to keep alive. That tells you everything about the design problem. So what actually works? 4 questions to ask before you buy your next motorcycle battery. First, can you access the cells to add distilled water? If not, the service life ceiling is built in. Second, what voltage does your bike's charging system deliver at idle and at highway RPM? If the answer is not in the owner's manual, check it yourself with a multimeter. You want to see 13.8 to 14.5 volts at normal operating speed. Third, what does the battery warranty specifically exclude? Storage damage, deep discharge, and undercharging are the 3 most common exclusions, and they are also the 3 most common causes of failure. Fourth, does this bike require a battery tender during storage? And did anyone at the dealership mention it? If you are using a sealed AGM, the single best investment you can make is a quality smart tender connected during any storage period longer than 2 weeks. It will not make the battery last forever, but it is the difference between a 3-year battery and a 5-year battery, and it costs less than a tank of gas. The word they chose was maintenance free. What that actually means is that the one thing you could do to keep the battery alive for a decade, opening a cap, and adding water is no longer possible. They did not remove the cap because it was dangerous. They removed it because a battery you cannot maintain is a battery you have to replace. And a battery you have to replace is a battery they get to sell you again.